Hello, B.Ed first year students. Come and join me as I introduce to you on how you are going to teach in primary grades. Of course, the subject is none other than science. And now, when we talk about science teaching in the primary grades, of course, our main basis there is the K to 12 curriculum guide. So therefore, in the K to 12 curriculum, it is stated there what are the competencies that the students need to achieve on that certain period or on that certain grade level. And when we talk about primary, so it starts from grade 1, 2, 3. But when we talk about science as a subject, of course, in grade 1 and grade 2, it is integrated to other subject. But in grade 3, it is a what? Independent subject na siya or separate subject. That is why, of course, as a teacher, we need to know how we are going to deal those pupils, particularly in the primary grades. And now, without further ado, let's know the nature of science teaching with the use of the framework of the K to 12. But before that, of course, let's be guided with these lesson outcomes. So we have first, describe the science framework in the K to 12. Number two, discuss the framework relative to each grade level. And now, let's have the framework itself. I know most of you are what belongs to the K to 12 curriculum. And of course, when we talk about K to 12 curriculum, it is in accord with the Republic Act 10533 or also known as the Enhanced Basic Education Act of 2013. And of course, in regards with this, we have this science framework in K to 12. So as you can see in the PowerPoint presentation, so the top is scientific, technological, and environmental literacy. We also have at the center some sort of circle that is divided into three. So we have demonstrating scientific inquiry skills, understanding and applying scientific knowledge, and developing and demonstrating scientific attitudes and values. And of course, we have the critical, creative problem solving, responsible steward of nature, so on and so forth. And under this one, we have the different approaches. Don't worry, we will just focus on this part. Why? Because the approaches, strategies, techniques will be discussed at the end or after we are done with the contents of biology and chemistry. Okay, so next. And of course, science as a whole, as provided by the National Framework of the DepEd or the Department of Education, responds to the 21st century literacy. Of course, we are dealing with 21st century learners. That is why, as a teacher, we need to know how we are going to meet their needs, which is the science and technological literacy. So when we talk about science and technological literacy, it is the what? It is the main goal of science learning. That is why it has three components. What are its three components? So we have first, understanding and applying scientific knowledge. Number two, developing and demonstrating scientific attitudes and values. And of course, number three, performing scientific inquiry skills. So let's start with the first component, understanding and applying scientific knowledge. When we talk about understanding, more on what? Comprehension. So, it is somehow related to the Bloom's taxonomy. So, if you want to know more about Bloom's taxonomy, you may search it on the internet. So, when we talk about Bloom's taxonomy, the older version starts with what? Knowledge. It is the basic, it is the foundation of all knowledge. After having a knowledge, we'll proceed with the next one, which is the comprehension or the understanding. After comprehension, we have the application. After application, we have the analysis. After analysis, we have the synthesis. And of course, last is the evaluation. But we also have a newer version of that one. Wait a minute. Sorry for that interruption. So, of course, this is a one-shot video. That is why I will not be able to edit this one. So, pasensyahin na lang itong nanawag. Sa nanawag, shout out dai ko, hello dira. Okay, so let's continue. So, Bloom's taxonomy has this what we call new version. So, what do you think the new version of this Bloom's taxonomy? So, it starts with what? Remembering. After remembering, we have understanding. After understanding, we have applying, analyzing, we have evaluating, and synthesizing. So I really do hope you will research that one on the internet. So of course, after we gain our knowledge, as what it stated here, that science literacy starts with acquisition of knowledge, such as ideas, concepts, generalization, and theories. So after what? Acquiring that knowledge, or acquiring that knowledge, therefore, you could be able to what? Turn it into understanding. If you really understand certain concept, or shall I say theory, always remember that you cannot proceed to applying if you did not fully understood on what is that certain concept all about. And also here in understanding and applying scientific knowledge, it is really important to memorize facts. But always remember that facts should be understood and used in daily lives, because according to the principles of learning by Horn and Pine, it is stated there that learning is the discovery of personal meaning and relevance of ideas. So therefore, as a teacher, particularly as we are teaching primary grade students, so we need to make use of what? Examples that are relevant or related to their experiences for them to have a meaningful learning. So next, we have number 2, we have the performing scientific inquiry skills. So by the way, let's go back first. So by the way, in number 1, understanding and applying scientific concept or knowledge, it focuses more on cognitive domain. Meanwhile, here in number 2, performing scientific inquiry skills, it focuses more on what? Psychomotor domain. Why? Because of the word performing. So the main thing of this component is it is a set of skills to be learned by the students. It is a systematic approach used by scientists in order to answer mind-boggling questions. Of course, here in science, we'll be dealing with scientific inquiry. So therefore, there is what? We teachers, we tend to give questions, and we tend to what? Let the students discover what is the answer. So here are some examples. So let's focus more on kindergarten to grade 4 learners. So we have asked questions about objects, organisms, and events in the environment. So in this way, you could be able to what? Awaken the schema of your students. And of course, plan and conduct a simple investigation. Sorry. So in this way, the students could be able to discover their own learning, explore their own learning, and of course, employ simple equipment and tools to gather data and extend the senses. You know what? The more senses, the more student can learn. So make use of these certain materials. And of course, use data to construct reasonable explanation, and of course, communicate investigations and explanations. So those are the things that you will what? Expect your students to perform. Particularly, it is one of the components of science and technology literacy. Next. And of course, let's not forget the number 3. If in number 1, it focuses more on in cognitive domain. Number 2, more on psychomotor domain. Here in number 3, it focuses more on what? Affective domain. So it is stated there that developing and demonstrating scientific attitudes and values. So you know what? This certain component is essential. Why? Because it is a way of thinking, feeling, acting, and a disposition towards science. That is why, as a teacher, we need to be what? We need to provide a positive atmosphere for the students to have a positive outlook, most especially to our subject science. Let me share you this. Of course, in elementary, ang mga bata, they tend to emulate their teacher. Some of you, siguro, you choose B.Ed because there is this one teacher in elementary na nindot kay siya mutudlo. That is why you tend to be like him or her. That is why, as a teacher, we need to possess positive values towards science that will be contagious to our students. And of course, part of attitudes and values, we have the scientific attitude. So not only the students will have this one, but the teacher should also be. Like we have number one, curiosity. A scientist must be curious about the world. So you know what? Curiosity leads to activity. Char. Of course, if we are curious, we tend to ask questions with ourselves and we tend to look for answers. That is part of being curious. Number two, we have humility. Scientists admits failures and recognizes that there are better ideas. So as a teacher rather, we need to what inculcate in the mind of our students that they are really prone to failure. But they should know how to cope up with that failure and try another thing again. So it seems like a mathematics problem wherein you tend to make use of what? Trial and error. If it doesn't work, therefore you need to try another strategy. And of course, number three, open-mindedness. Muchat dayon, open-minded ka ba? Networking di ay? Of course not. When we talk about open-mindedness, so therefore the scientist or the students listens and respects the ideas of others. Therefore, we are not close-minded. We are open for constructive criticisms. In short, we should be teachable. And of course, number four, intellectual honesty. A scientist is intellectual honest. Therefore, all the things that you will do is in accord with the theory and you should not take credit solely. So therefore, you need to inculcate in your students for most especially if your subject is research based. Therefore, that certain citation in your research must be what? Credited to the rightful owner. So, intellectual honesty yon. And of course, we have number five, perseverance. So, it is a scientist works hard and is persistent. So, therefore, meron siyang lakas ng loob that he or she will continue. The same with you, class. Di ba mayroon kayong perseverance? Because amid the fact that we are facing this pandemic, but still, you tend to enroll in this particular course. Number six, we also have skepticism. So a scientist does not jump to conclusion. Always remember that in scientific method, we need to first define the problem. After defining the problem, we need to make our hypothesis. After having hypothesis, we tend to gather data and analyze the data. And lastly, therefore, we could now conclude. And of course, number seven, creative and innovative. A scientist is creative and critical thinker. Therefore, we tend to what? Think outside the box. So we will not settle for the conventional methods or shall I say, way of doing things. Therefore, we need to try another things that hindi pa nasusubukan ng iba. And of course, we also have the rationale. So a scientist uses reasons or logical thinking before giving answers. So therefore, we could really say that we are rational being because we could be able to reason out. If yan yung conclusion mo, ano yung reason mo? Why did you come up with that conclusion? Yun. And number 9, objectivity. A scientist is willing to suspend judgment until he is sure of his results. So we have two, objective and subjective. When we talk about objective, you tend to achieve what is with your objective. That is the nature of objectivity. We also have number 10, innovative. Scientist tries new approaches to arrive at conclusions. So yun kanina. So those are the scientific attitudes that you need to what? Get acquainted for you to be able to teach your students. So again, we have the three components. Always remember those things. And of course, based on these phases, all science learners who aim to be scientifically and technologically literate should be what? So, di ba kanina meron yung circle? So, these are those things. First, critical and creative problem solver, responsible steward of nature, innovative and inventive thinker, informed decision maker, and effective communicator. So, the three components are somehow related to this one, but let's dig deeper our knowledge with these things. We have number 1, critically and creative problem solver. Of course, we have scientific inquiry. From that inquiry of ours, or even given by our teacher, the learner must be able to what? Find a solution. So learners have developed skills that enable them to analyze and find solutions to any perplexing questions of problems. Yun yung sinabi ko. They have other ways of solving problem. Always remember that if our solution can't solve the problem, therefore we need to find another way of solving it. So therefore, it is more on trial and error. Number 2, responsible steward of nature. Of course, when we talk about science, I know most of us think of nature. So learners demonstrate concern in keeping the environment safe for themselves and for everybody. So therefore, if we have this subject, therefore, if we will teach those students in primary grades, we need to inculcate them the value of protecting the environment. Because we have a quotation stated that ang kinaiyahan mabuhi bisan walay tao, pero ang tao dili mabuhi kung walay kinaiyahan. And they become citizens who take responsibility of their actions in protecting the environment. So therefore, they need to be what? Nation builders who tend to be catalysts of change. And we also have number 3, innovative and inventive thinker. So learners create and innovate something simple for humanity. So, of course, if we will give the child the opportunity to become innovative as well as inventive, therefore, they could carry that one up until they will grow. And they become scientists and inventors of the future. Yun yung sinabi ko. That is why in our subject, of course, I am encouraging you to innovate as well as to invent something, most especially materials that are helpful for the primary grades pupils to learn science easily. And we also have informed decision maker. So learners should be able to develop the ability to make informed decisions. They become independent learners. Although we are promoting collaboration or cooperative learning, but we need to also teach the child on how he or she could be able to learn independently. Because by allowing an individual to decide by his or her own, therefore they could be able to take their own responsibility or take risk. Next, effective communicator. Of course, communication is the key. That is why learners convey correct message to others, written or oral. They share their findings. As a teacher, part of our teaching to our students, we need to inculcate them the value of what? Communication. Because effective communication will what? Will have a ripple effect to the relationship inside the classroom. Most especially if they are learning science. So, those are the things that you need to remember when we talk about this science framework in the K-12. Don't worry, I know some of you might say that medyo gamay ra siya. Yes, but there will be a part 2 of this video wherein we will discuss what are the competencies of the science K-12 curriculum. So always remember this saying by Benjamin Franklin. Tell me and I forget. Teach me and I remember. Involve me and I learn. So therefore, for you to be able to learn, you need to get involved with the teaching and learning process. By the way, this is Mark Jan M. Martinez, your pogging instructor.